Blessed summer season, everybody, and Tony here with my review of Verdi's La Traviata, which I saw at the Staatsoper Unter den Linden. The conductor was Jeanine De Bique. The production was done by Dieter Dorn, Marcin Jakumiczki, and Christiana Zaunmeier. The sets were done by Joanna Peterszinska. The costumes were done by Moidele Bickel and Dorothea Uhrmacher. The lights were handled by Tobias Löffler. The choreographer was Martin Gruber, and the chorus master was Gerhard Polivka. I was really excited to check out this particular production of Verdi's La Traviata at the Staatsoper Unter den Linden because I wanted to see, hear, and witness Jeanine De Bique perform the role of Violetta Valery. But before I get to her performance, a few thoughts on the production. This production of Verdi's La Traviata at the Staatsoper Unter den Linden stripped away a lot of the glitz, glamour, and pomp that traditional productions have and mainly try to involve the audience in what is going on in Violetta's mindset, let alone psyche. The entire opera starts off with Annina gathering a bouquet of flowers for Violetta. And Violetta, who is mainly in a black slip, sees a skull formation in the mirror, which then disassembles to a group of dancers who represent Violetta's inner psyche. So what we see is Violetta essentially preparing for her own passing away or death, given the singular black strip that she has, and then she dons a silver gown when she's in public, but when she's in private, she has her little black slip, and the only other costume that she also wears is a white robe when she meets up with Alfredo and Giorgio Germont, and then she reverts back to her silver gown when she is at the party at Flora's house. Then she reverts back to her black slip when she is at her death scene. The only other props from this production are some pillows, some chairs, a couch, and a huge mirror with a sack of sand falling down, and that mirror represents Violetta's inner psyche and her fate, that she is going to die from tuberculosis. And she does not end the opera fainting dramatically. Instead, she enters the mirror to vanish away from Dottore Grenville, Giorgio Germont, Alfredo Germont, and Annina. So this production was not really to my liking. I was not a huge fan of it. It was just much too simplistic and minimalistic for my taste, and it just left me disinterested and disengaged because I would have loved to have a lot more elegance, a lot more intricacy, detail, and absolute gorgeousness, much like any traditional production of La Traviata, complete with gorgeous costumes, intricate sets, and a whole lot of pomp, especially for Violetta's and Flora's respective parties. And lest I forget about the bucolic elegance when Alfredo and Violetta live together, and the gloominess when Violetta is about to succumb to her tuberculosis. At least the costumes were generally nice to look at, although they're not totally outstanding. Therefore, the production of Verdi's La Traviata, done by Dieter Dorn, Marcin Jakumiczki, and Christiana Zaunmeier, was not really that interesting to look at. I know that they worked really hard on this, but I was not a huge fan of it. It was not really my cup of tea. And although Jeanine De Bique looked absolutely gorgeous and moved really well with all of her costumes, it was not enough to save my overall sentiments from this Regie-Theater production of Verdi's La Traviata at the Staatsoper Unter den Linden. But at least the singing was absolutely fabulous, especially from certain singers, starting off with Jeanine De Bique as Violetta Valery. She was in the vein of a lot of the lyric sopranos who sang Violetta. namely Mafalda Favero, Licia Albanese, Dorothy Kirsten, Victoria de los Angeles, Lucina Mara, Gabriella Tucci, Rosanna Carteri, Montserrat Caballé, Mirella Freni, and Katia Ricciarelli. She's essentially a plush-sounding, full-lyric soprano with really good high notes, and even though she did not hit the high E flat after Sempre Libera, I thought she was able to sing the role so excitingly, complete with such a creamy, luscious, plush, and fully toned instrument that was able to fill out the theater. Yes, I do prefer a full-bodied lyric coloratura soprano or even dramatic coloratura soprano singing Violetta, with my personal favorites being Luisa Tetrazzini, Mercedes Capsir, Amelita Galli-Curci, Lina Pagliughi, Maria Callas, Virginia Zeani, Joan Sutherland, Melita Museli, Leila Gencer, Anna Moffo, Silvia Gisti, Valerie Masterson, and even the high-singing lyric sopranos such as Pilar Lorengar and Ileana Kotrubash. Those were my favorite Violettas, who not only had those piercing high notes that extended up to high E flat or even further, but also had excellent techniques, especially where the likes of Mercedes Capsir, Luisa Tetrazzini, and Amelita Galli-Curci were concerned. I do also have to applaud Jeanine De Bique for her excellent use of chest tones, especially on certain occasions. However, there were certain moments where she did have some slight vocal faults, but not enough to dent her performance. In fact, I thought she was thoroughly wonderful all throughout, all thanks to her dedication, as well as how much she genuinely cared for her craft as a singing actress. Sure, she did have a slightly throaty start, but she got clearer and clearer throughout the rest of the opera, and there were some occasions where she kind of ducked out on some of the chest tones, let alone coordinated chest tones, and would have loved to see her thoroughly commit to singing in a lot more chest tones and really coordinate head voice and chest voice a whole lot more superbly and in a more sterling manner. Furthermore, Jeanine De Bique's voice and repertoire makes me think that she could do a lot more with roles such as Mignon from Ambroise Thomas Mignon, Anna from Puccini's Le Villi, Magda di Civri from Puccini's La Rondine, Luisa Miller from Verdi's Luisa Miller, Medora from Verdi's Il Corsaro, Giovanna d'Arco from Verdi's Giovanna d'Arco, and Mélisande from Debussy's Péléas et Mélisande, as well as Berthe from Meyerbeer's Le Prophète, and Anne Truelove from Stravinsky's The Rake's Progress. Those are roles that I believe are way more suitable for her natural full lyric soprano voice rather than something a lot more florid and a lot more assoluta such as Violetta Valery. But even though I did have some nitpicks with Jeanine De Bique, I could easily forgive all of them because Jeanine De Bique was absolutely brilliant and sterling all throughout. This is the same soprano that I've listened to perform the role of Agno from Mozart's La Clemenza di Tito almost 8 years ago live from the Salzburger Festspielhaus. And as I continued to read through her repertoire and her biography, I appreciated all of the diversity and versatility that Jeanine De Bique was defined by. From singing a lot of the lyrical roles such as Micaela from Carmen to slightly more florid roles such as Massenet Cendrillon, I was totally head over heels in love with everything Jeanine De Bique had to offer. And her performance, both vocally and theatrically, as Violetta Valery was no exception whatsoever. So I have to give my hat off to Jeanine De Bique for such a laudable job as this iconic courtesan heroine. Natalia Skritska was a sufficiently plush, gorgeously toned, and absolutely luscious Flora Bervois who is able to use that signature lyric mezzo-soprano voice to her advantage and therefore made her performance shine so beautifully. And Adriana Queiroz was also just as well coordinated and just as pleasing to the ear, both theatrically and vocally, as Anina. David Ostrek was a dashing and fine Dottor Grenville, although I do prefer a lot more plushness, roundness, and richness in the likes of Plino Clabassi, who was my number one favorite performer as Dottora Grenville, but I could still give David Ostrek a whole lot of kudos for his absolutely fine and superb musicianship. George Peteyan stole the show tonight as Giorgio Germont. His round, rich, and piercing and incisive and emotionally charged baritone voice was such a major asset to a role that he has been performing for what feels like several years. He definitely had so much experience as Giorgio Germont that I was able to root for him with all of my heart, mind, and soul. His voice kind of reminds me of an amalgamation of Leonard Warren and Cornell McNeil in the lower register, with a bit of Cheryl Milnes when he hits those high notes. Sometimes I do feel like there have been rounder and richer baritones who have specialized as Giorgio Germont, such as some of my personal favorites being Robert Merrill, Cornell McNeil, Leonard Warren, and Lawrence Tibbett, but George Peteyan was still as charismatic, virile, and emotionally charged as Giorgio Germont that I still have to give my hat off to him. Jaka Michelotz was a superbly dashing Barone du Fol, thanks to his trademark cavalier baritone voice that managed to be pleasant to the ear, as well as possessing fine vocal presence from beginning to end. Bogdan Volkov had a rich and handsomely toned tenor voice as Alfredo Germont. His full lyric tenor voice was able to sound really fine to the ear, and it had that round, rich, and voluminous quality that I've come to appreciate about him. Sometimes he did have moments of throatiness and a little bit of nasality in certain areas. However, some of those liabilities can be forgiven because Bogdan Volkov is a consistent singing actor who is able to give the goods by letting his voice soar throughout that orchestra, as well as provide a lot of discipline, dedication, and diligence as an overall performer as Alfredo Germont. While I can never ever neglect the likes of Giuseppe Di Stefano, Giacinto Prandelli, and Alfredo Kraus as some of my personal favorite singers for Alfredo Germont, I still have to give Bogdan Volkov a whole lot of credit for what he was able to accomplish as Alfredo Germont. And also, while he did not sing the high C after wrapping up his cabaletta, O mio rimorso, that's kind of a small price, let alone dent to pay for what was otherwise a really stirring performance and an exciting one at that. On top of that, his chemistry with Jeanine De Bique as Violetta Valery was absolutely lovely and gorgeous all throughout. So I have to give a whole lot of salutes and a whole lot of applauses to Bogdan Volkov for such a superb and stirring performance as Alfredo Germont. Taehan Kim was an absolutely dashing and handsome Marchesa d'Aubigny, using his superbly toned and clean and clear and focused cavalier baritone voice to his advantage, especially when he has some of that roundness at his disposal, thus making him all the more alluring to listen to and to watch, and even ensured that he remained as dapper and dashing as ever, regardless of where he's in. And he definitely knew how to play up that virility that made Marchese d'Aubigny turn from an otherwise thankless role into a role that worked really well in his favor. Junho Huang made great use of his light lyric tenor voice to make the role of Viscount Gastone his own, and he was able to sing with sufficient pleasantness and a whole lot of fine musicianship. And I also have to give a whole lot of salute to Sungjin Lee, who sang The Servant, and Javier Bernardo, who sang Giuseppe, Violetta's servant, as both of them did fine jobs in making the best out of these really small roles. So overall, the singing was pretty exciting from all across the board. I especially admired Jeanine De Bique for her laudable portrayal as Violetta Valery, her overall commitment to her craft, her great growth as an artist, and her overall involvement in the drama made her performance as Violetta a thoroughly credible one and an exciting one, even to the point where I was able to be on cloud nine witnessing everything that Jeanine De Bique had to offer and just watch her work her magic to the nines. She was also joined by some equally fine performers such as Bogdan Volkov's virile Alfredo Germont and George Peteyan's thoroughly involving Giorgio Germont. They were able to make such a great use of their respective roles with everything that they've got, and Jeanine De Bique definitely carried the evening on her shoulders, complete with dedication, a lot of diligence, and a whole lot of discipline that made her shine like the brightest of diamonds as a fabulous full lyric soprano with really fine agility, owning the role of Violetta Valery. While she may not be that full-bodied lyric coloratura soprano that I've always appreciated in the likes of Anna Moffo or Melita Museli or even Valerie Masterson, I still have to salute Jeanine De Bique for her overall amazing dedication and commitment as a wonderful singing actress as Violetta Valery. Special acknowledgement also has to go to Natalia Skritska, Adriana Queiroz, Junho Huang, Jaka Michelac, Tehan Kim, David Ostrek, Javier Bernardo, and Sungjin Lee for absolutely fine and stirring performances. And I can never forget about the wonderful dancers who were able to perform the roles of Violetta's oncoming death so superbly. And those were Naomi Abuja, Stephanie Ilova Benz, Christina Berger, Laura Hagemann, Klaus Lotzek, Clara de Pin, Paulo Queiroz dos Santos, and Josefina Witt. They were absolutely fabulous, and they were able to provide such a fine performance as Violetta's oncoming death really superbly. And the conducting done by Jérémy Roret was quite surprising. I would never really expect someone who mainly specializes in Mozart or Baroque music to tackle Verdi. And I know that there were some people from the audience who booed him, as well as booed certain aspects of the production, although it is rather justifiable with the production. But in terms of Jérémy Roret as a conductor, I didn't really find too much fault with his conducting skills. His conducting for Verdi actually surprised me. He was really detailed in terms of finding out where he can use that soft and fine lyricism and where he was able to go all out. And even though it's not as Italianate or crisp, such as the ones I've really admired in the likes of Tullio Serafin or Herbert von Karajan, or one of my personal favorite conductors of all time, Vittorio Gui, as well as Arturo Toscanini, I still have to give a lot of kudos to Jérémie Rogé for such a dedicated effort in terms of bringing the chorus and orchestra together. And the chorus and the orchestra of the Staatsoper Unter den Linden were thoroughly superb all the way through, and also gave their all in where they were in. So overall, even though I am not a fan of this particular production of Verdi's La Traviata, the Staatsoper Unter den Linden, I can never ever deny just how fabulous the singing really was. Jeanine De Bique was able to sing up a storm as Violetta, complete with great involvement, great attention to not only the text, but also the drama. And she was able to sell it all the way through as such an iconic courtesan heroine. She was able to physically inhabit this role with such beauty and grace, like a dancer or an angel or a seraphim. And she also sang the role so superbly with technical proficiency and a whole lot of theatrical abandon that I salute her for all of her laudable efforts. And for those of you who caught this production of Verdi's La Traviata at the Staatsoper Unter den Linden, what'd you think of it? Did you feel that Jeanine De Bique was able to sell it so superbly as Violetta Valery? Was there another singer who stole her thunder, whether it was Bogdan Volkov as Alfredo Germont or George Peteyan as Giorgio Germont? Was there also a singer from the smaller parts that felt like needed a lot more acclaim, whether it was Natalia Skritska or Adriana Queiroz or Junho Huang or David Ostrek or Tehan Kim or Jaka Michalats? Or was the singing not really to your liking? Or did you also feel that the production did no justice for La Traviata whatsoever? Please let me know in the comments below. Well, that's it for my review of Verdi's La Traviata, the Staatsoper Unter den Linden. Tune in next time for, hopefully, my review of Richard Strauss's Die Schweigsame Frau, also at the Staatsoper Unter den Linden. So until then, have a pleasant summer break, everybody.